Can you do something for me real quick? Can you do your David Byrne impression? No. Can you do it for me? Do it for me. I need this for the intro of my video. Do it for me.
Same as it ever was. Same as it ever was.
Oh my god. Like I love how every classic review I've been doing this week has been like super bright or super dark, super gloomy. I've had to shut the blinds, open the blinds. It's like ridiculous because Michigan just doesn't know what it wants to be this winter. Hey everybody, ChannelBK, thank you so much for tuning in, and we are ending this third Classics Week, with the fourth studio album from Talking Heads, entitled Remain in Light. Talking Heads, acclaimed new wave and alt-rock group. And like I said, this is their fourth studio album released in 1980, and in my opinion, it's probably one of the most important records of the 1980s. Up until this point, Talking Heads were in a more sort of punkish, sort of alt-rock sound, where this album sort of blew things out of the water with them incorporating sort of like African rhythmics and electronic sounds and funk sounds. And they brought on Brian Eno of Roxy Music fame, as well as his own sort of solo stuff to produce this record. And let me tell you guys, this being my first introduction to Talking Heads, I was so blown away. Because what Jerry, Tina, Chris, and David did on this record was very interesting. Because the main sort of crux of this album is just looping. They looped a lot of sort of the bass lines and the guitar licks and the drum patterns on here and the actual percussion on here, and they just obviously kept looping it, and it made for such a experimental, funky, groovy, and sometimes psychedelic release. And plus, like I said, the first time I ever listened to the Talking Heads, I was just so infatuated with David Byrne. I just love his personality. I love his performances. I love his vocals and his vocal delivery. It's just mesmerizing. And especially on this album, it just goes to completely new heights, and it's just so interesting. He does like spoken word, and like there's like weird abstract lyrics, and there's just all this stuff going on. And again, just with his performance on this record, it's just incredible. And then laced with these just groovy instrumentation. And we get that with Born Under Punches, the opening track to this album. I love the groovy bass line. I just love the sharp hitting guitar licks on here. And this lyrically is David Byrne sort of painting the public paranoia about the Watergate scandal. And again, like his vocal delivery also just goes well with that sort of paranoia. Like he's kind of freaking out a little bit. He's going all over the place. His like registers just going everywhere. And again, like it really adds to the character of this track, and it just comes in hard hitting, but it's also a little bit sort of mellow and slow. But then we get to Cross-Eyed and Painless, which just sort of comes in a little bit more guns blazing. The percussion is like a little bit more all over the place. It's a little bit clankier. I love it. And I love the lyrics on this track about like losing your identity and trying to get it back. I especially like when the third verse comes around, the guitar licks sort of, you know, then the great curve comes on, which again, you thought it was getting faster and quicker, and then this song comes on. Oh my god, I love the way this track is just put together. It's psychedelic. I love the percussion. I love, again, the guitar licks just go well with the psychedelic stuff. And especially the chorus on this track is amazing. I love sort of all the background vocals to David just like swooning vocals, and then by the end it's like every single background to every chorus on this song just is layered on top of each other, and it's just all over the place, and you're just like, oh my god, it's just coming from everywhere, but it's so cool and it's so interesting, and the music just keeps you enticed. Then we get to probably their biggest, most iconic song, Once in a Lifetime, which I love the iconic groove on this song. Boom, 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 boom. And then sort of his sort of preacher-esque delivery on here with some of the most abstract lyrics from the group. In a weird way though, like even though they're, you know, a lot of people make fun of, there's water in the bottom of the ocean. Well, no shit, David. But at the same time, I feel like when you really look into the lyrics, I feel like it's just a very enticing and interesting way of him sort of delivering these lines about just life and how it moves through and sort of all these ideas going on and how we got to certain places. And again, like, it comes off very like over your head, like you're kind of like, what is going on here? But I feel like when you really look into it, it's just this very interesting way of him just talking about the world moving forward. And then something like Houses of Motion, which is a little bit more kind of laid back. I love, again, just the production on here is great. I just love sort of the warpy, sort of psychedelic guitar leads on here. And again, I love the chorus. Seen and Not Seen kind of takes a very interesting turn. It's one of the shorter tracks on here. It has sort of like this spacey feel to it from the instrumentation, and it seems like there's sort of like spacey synths on here, but this track is very much spoken poetry. There's no chorus, there's no real like vocal delivery. It's just David giving out these two spoken word verses about this man who feels insecure about himself and trying to change himself, looking at the media and seeing what the media is telling him to do and all that, and sort of how it's a very like honest feeling that we all might have when watching TV and looking at magazines of like models and whatnot. And again, it's a very just interesting sort of mix of David's quirkiness mixed with the very funky and sort of spacey instrumentation. Then Listening Wind, which is again another weird psychedelic track on here. He sort of paints the picture of this man, this Native American by the name of Mojique, bombing American colonists, and it's very dark and heavy, but it's also, again, very dreamlike and very, like, gorgeous. I love it. I love sort of the story he paints about how this Native American sort of, Mojique rather, seeing all these American colonists come and sort of do all this stuff, and he's getting these ideas in his head on how to take revenge, and so that he obviously takes revenge on him. And I love just the progression of that first verse that sort of builds the story and sort of the backstory, and then the second verse just kind of opens it up, and then again just like the wind in my hair, and then the just huge dark atmospheric finale, the Overload, finishes off this entire album. And again, in a weird way, like it's not like it doesn't fit with the rest of the album, but it just feels a lot bigger and heavier, and it's weird because it's very minimal in terms of the lyrics for it being, I think, the longest song on the entire album. I think this is really just an intense track, and I love the backstory behind it too, about how they were trying to make like a Joy Division song, but they never actually heard Joy Division. They just used it as kind of a reference point, like from what everyone said about them, so they made this sort of dark, eerie track, and I think it's a great way to end this album. But honestly though, at the end of the day, I just think this is a great funk, new wave, post-punk record from a band that sort of had one sort of style in mind up until this point, and the second this album came out, it just blew up for them. I think it changed and shaped music down the road. I think Brian Eno was just a great contribution to this album, putting it together. And again, I think lyrically this album is very interesting, and it just takes a lot for you to digest it. I think musically, I love all the loops on here. Again, the percussion is great. The guitars and the bass lines are groovy and funky and psychedelic. I love it. And again, it's quirky, it's weird, it's also catchy, it's very honest, and I love the poetry on here. And again, I think it's just a fabulous record, and I think if you haven't listened to this record, it's a must listen, must consume album, probably one of the most important albums of the 1980s. So if you guys, and also I think in music in general, but if you guys listen to this album, if you've heard this album, what are some of your favorite tracks, all that sort of stuff. Favorite Talking Heads album, yes or no? Leave it in the comments below. If you like and please subscribe. I thank you guys so much for watching this Third Classics week. I'm super excited to have done it, and I'm very excited that, you know, I just get to keep doing it. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and thank you guys so much for tuning into ChannelBK. Peace out, guys.